So when I reviewed the Montech King 95 Pro almost a year ago, I was very impressed with the curved glass, the hardware and cooling support, and the super competitive price. In its latest case, Montech has taken away the curve, but does this new case still offer the same level of performance and value for money? Well, that's what we're here to find out in this review of the Montech King 65 Pro. So this is the Montech King 65 Pro. It looks quite similar to the King 95 Pro, but it doesn't have any curve on it anymore. It's got square corners to the glass. It's available in either black or white color schemes. The MSRP price is $99 US. In the UK, you can pick it up from Scan, priced at £75. King 65 Pro is designed with a simplified approach and including a host of features such as tool-free, quick release mechanisms, efficient ventilation, extensive graphics card support, and ample storage options. 60% of the top panel surface area is covered with mesh to allow heat to be expelled from the system, and 75% of the right side panel is mesh to provide additional ventilation. The case supports ATX motherboards, graphics cards up to 420mm long, and versatile cooling including up to 360mm top radiators, up to 9 fans, and up to 175mm tall CPU air coolers. It's also built from high quality materials including 0.8 to 1mm thick sheet steel panels, just like the King 95 Pro. So this is basically a King 95 Pro without the curved front. The other features of the case and specifications are identical to the King 95 Pro, and there's a good reason for that. You'll see that in a moment when we take a closer look at the chassis. It has tool-free panels, so all the side panels, top panel, are all tool-free. To remove this tempered glass side panel, just a single thumb screw in the back, and then there's just a tab at the back there. You can use that to push the panel off and then lift it out. You'll notice in this white version the tempered glass is clear, but in the black version it has a really heavy dark tint to it. Right hand side panel comes off in the same way, just a single thumb screw at the rear, push the tab back and it lifts out. It is a highly ventilated ultra-fine mesh panel. 75% of that panel is mesh to provide additional airflow to the system. Top panel's also removed tool-free. There's no screws or thumb screws or anything to take out of this. It just pushes out from the back and then lifts off. There's 2 quick release pins on each side of this top panel. Again, it's ultra-fine mesh. 60% of the panel is mesh, and there's no dust filters or any removable dust filters on these mesh panels. Front panel also removes tool-free. Just push it out from the top, then it lifts out. Again, quick release pins holding it at the top, and it just slots into a bracket at the bottom. Again, this is like the side panel. It's a completely clear tempered glass panel. The top radiator bracket is removable. This is a feature that I like to see. There's just a few screws to take out of this. So there's actually 2 screws at each side. They're not thumb screws. Once you've got these screws removed, that top radiator bracket then just lifts out. On here, you can install either 320mm fans, 2 140mm fans, or up to a 360mm radiator. So that includes a 120, 140, 240, 280, or 360mm radiator on the top panel. There are 3 fans included with the King 65. There's 240mm fans on this right hand side mount, and then a 120mm fan in the rear. These are reverse blade, so they're intakes, but you can see the front of the fan, which is nice to have reverse blade fans in cases like this. Like the King 95, you can actually remove a couple of screws from this side bracket, one at the bottom and one at the top, thumb screws, and then this front bracket folds out and you pop a thumb screw down at the bottom there to hold it in place, and then there's a little mount that twists out at the top there. Pop a thumb screw in there, and then you can change the fans from being on the side to the front. In the King 95, that was a good feature because it came with a mesh front panel, but the King 65 doesn't come with that panel. So it seems like a bit of a pointless feature having those fans as intakes potentially behind a solid glass panel. I think Montech could have just forgotten about that feature in this case, but the reason it's probably stayed in is because the actual core chassis is identical to the King 95. Montech just added a couple of plastic pieces on the front corners to convert it from curved to a square front panel. So that's probably why that is still an adjustable or hinged fan bracket there that you can pull around to the front. Not really useful in this case, but it is still there. I would suggest anybody who's using this case to just leave the fans on the side mount there as intakes pulling in cool air from the right hand side of the system. The floor of the case is also highly ventilated. On there you can install up to 3 120 or 2 140mm fans. Potentially could install radiators in there, but there isn't a lot of space between this floor and the motherboard tray, so radiators aren't really compatible on the floor of the case. It does have a dust filter for the floor, just pulls out from the back. It's the only real removable dust filter in the system. It's a nylon type dust filter on a plastic frame. Nice and easy to remove for cleaning that. And the reason there's no removable fan bracket on the floor of the case is because you install the fans from the inside and then screw them down to the floor. The fan mounts are actually threaded into the floor, so it doesn't really need a removable fan bracket. The space on the motherboard tray for up to ATX motherboards, so that also includes micro ATX and ITX motherboard. You'll notice that this is the same as the King 95 Pro, so there's no cutouts for back connect motherboards, so motherboards like MSI Project Zero and Asus BTF not supported in the King 65, which is a bit of a shame. I would have liked to have seen that support. In terms of cable management round this side, a couple of cutouts at the top there. Down at the bottom there's a couple more cutouts. Neither of those have rubber grommets on. Then there's two bigger cutouts down the side of the motherboard there. They do have rubber grommets. There's 7 PCIe slots in total. It doesn't come with any bracketry to convert this to vertical, so it is just really horizontal graphics card or horizontal PCIe mounting. It supports graphics cards up to 420mm long. I think that should cover more or less, if not every graphics card currently on the market. And maximum CPU cooler height is up to 175mm tall. On the front panel there's a single USB Type C port, 2 USB 3 Type A ports, 3.5mm audio jacks for audio and mic, and an LED button and power button. The right hand side of the front panel that isn't tempered glass is made out of plastic, but it's kind of got a brushed effect to it to make it almost look like brushed aluminium. Around the back of the case it's very typical of dual chamber cases. Fan mount here, motherboard rear IO cutout, then 7 horizontal PCIe slots. At the bottom at this side is the power supply mount. Potentially you can swap it between here and here, because at the top you've got this little panel that just comes off. And then in here are a couple of storage drive mounts. So potentially in those you can either fit two 2.5 or two 3.5 inch drives. That drive bay is also completely removable. If you take out the 4 screws, and then that comes out completely. And with that removed, then you have potentially got the choice of whether you want to install your power supply here or up here, or you could install 2 power supplies. And switch around to this right hand side. This panel here is for storage, so there's a couple of 2.5 inch drive mounts on there. Potentially you can also install fans here. If you did flip the side mount round to the front, you could then add a couple of fans to this panel. There's a couple of screws that need taking out to remove this. So just one at the top and one at the bottom, small countersunk screws. And then that can hinge open and you can leave that on to install the system, access everything, or you can just push that out and that panel can be removed quite simply. In here you can see the 240mm fans with the reverse blades, so they're set as intakes pulling cool air through the vented side panel and into the main compartment of the system. You can see the cable management channel down the center there with some Velcro straps. There's plenty of other eyelets to tie cables down to, but the majority of cables will be run down this central position. Up at the top here is an RGB PWM fan hub. There's 6 ports on that hub, so if you add more case fans you can plug it into the port and have all the fans running together. The fan hub connects to a motherboard header, so you can control the fan speed of all the fans connected to the hub using motherboard control, either through the BIOS or motherboard software. I like the fact that Montech has gone to the trouble of putting white cables with white connectors in the white case, but the couple of the cables from the hub are actually still black, which is a bit of a shame. I would like them all to be matching, but you will only be sending through the PWM and the 3-pin 5-volt header to the motherboard if you want to control the fan speed and ARGB lighting with motherboard software.
If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out boolies.co.uk.
The bottom of the case is heavily ventilated on both chambers, so at this side is where the fans will be mounted on the floor, so there's good ventilation, potentially good airflow in from the bottom there. The feet are made out of plastic with anti-vibration rubbers. They're about 25 millimeters tall, so that should give good ground clearance to allow for airflow to the bottom of the case. The only accessories that come with the case are included in this box. There's just a bag of assorted screws. There's a few additional side panel clips, so these little plastic clips here that hold the side panels and the front panels on, just in case one breaks, I guess. And there's also a few zip ties in there for cable management. So for the test system build, I've used an Intel Core i7-14700K CPU. Motherboard is a Z790 Aorus Elite AX Ice from Gigabyte. Graphics card is a Palette RTX 4070 Ti Super Gaming Pro in white. Memory is 64 GB, two 32 GB modules of G.Skill Ripjaws M5 RGB DDR5 6400. Storage is a 1TB Corsair MP700 PCIe Gen 5 NVMe M.2 SSD. The CPU cooler is an Arctic Liquid Freezer 360 AIO liquid cooler mounted in the roof of the case. Power supply is a Montech Titan Gold 1000 watt ATX3 PCIe 5 ready fully modular power supply. For the thermal testing, I've run a few different scenarios using just the stock fans that come with the case, so the pre-installed fans, and a few of these Montech RX 120 fans installed on the floor of the case with the case in different configurations. If you want to check out the full testing methodology, there's a written review page over at kitguru.net for the Montech King 65. All the testing methodology is on there. For the thermal load, it's a combined Cinebench R23 and 3D Mark Speedway stress test run simultaneously for 30 minutes. With a 360mm AIO CPU cooler in the roof and with the case in its default configuration just using the pre-installed fans, both the CPU and GPU temperature under heavy load are what we would expect from a case with good airflow at 67 and 42 degrees over ambient. There is very little change in both CPU and GPU temperature when removing the glass side panel or the top and right hand side mesh panels. Adding 320mm bottom intake fans drops the GPU temperature by a couple of degrees C, but this isn't enough to produce any performance gain. So the default configuration as the case is shipped by Montech is great at keeping high spec components cool. This is shown again in the system temperature chart where the default configuration produces a system temperature of just 15 degrees C over ambient under load. Again, removing panels has little effect on system temperature, but there is a 3 degrees C drop in system temperature with the bottom intake fans installed. So this might be worthwhile, but only if you have some extra cash to spend on additional fans. So normally at this point in a review video, I'd go over what issues I came across during the installation. With the Montech King 65 Pro, didn't come across any issues. It really is a simple case to install a system in. All the motherboard standoff alignment is great. Slotting the graphics card into the PCIe slots, there's no issues with that. All the alignment of that is good too. There's plenty of cable cutouts around the motherboard tray, so it's easy to pass cables through to the right hand side. And in the right hand side, there's the included Velcro straps, plenty of places to tie cables down to, so cable management is really easy also in the Montech King 65 Pro. Even with a 360mm radiator and fans installed at the top, there's still enough space to connect cables, so the fan cables and ARGB headers that are up there, you can still get to those with radiator in place. EPS cables are a bit tight to get to, but the great thing about this case, it has the removable top radiator bracket, so if you need to get to EPS after installation, you can just loosen off the bracket and lift the radiator out of the way very easily. Build quality of the case is excellent, as I say. The alignment of all standoffs for installation is good. Panel alignment on it is great. The color matching, so the different shades of white between different materials, between steel, the glass and plastic, they're all very closely matched, which is something that other cases don't get right, and even more expensive cases than this I've seen be quite poor in some other cases. So Montech's got the build quality spot on. Even when you remove the front and the side glass, the top corner of the case at the front, it's really strong. There's not much flex up there at all. So build quality is really high. The hardware support and cooling options are also great for a case at just £75. There's more than enough hardware and cooling support in here for even a high spec gaming system. So this is probably the closest case I've ever got to awarding a perfect 10 out of 10 review score, but there are some really minor negatives that just maybe knock it down half a point from getting a perfect 10. One of them is that there's no back connect cutouts on the motherboard tray, so the case doesn't support back connect motherboards like MSI Project Zero and Asus BTF. The other two things are really minor negatives, so I would have liked to have seen some more cable cutout grommets, especially in the cutouts at the bottom of the motherboard. And the only other thing I can think of really is the bottom fan mount. It would have been a benefit to have that as a removable mount, just so that you don't have to remove the graphics card from the system if you do want to install some fans or radiator down there at a later date. But because you install the fans from the top or from the inside, you screw the fans down to the floor, it isn't such a big deal at all. Just would be a little easier if you didn't have to remove the graphics card to install fans. But other than that, that's all I can say really negative, and they are really minor negatives. £75 in the UK. You've got 3 fans included, ARGB hub, great hardware support, the cooling and airflow in this case is good. It really is one of the best cases under £100, maybe one of the best cases out of all that is available today. So that's the Montech King 65 Pro. Let me know what you think of this case in the comment section. If you enjoyed watching the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. If you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you can always head over to the store, pick up some merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.